This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. As you can see, I am not joined by the ineffable Cody Williams today. He's living the best bachelor party life he possibly can here over in Nashville, but I'm coming to you guys semi-live with 3 yards in the Cloud of Punt after a very exciting week 5 here. Not for me personally, because Georgia just lost a stupid game. I knew they were going to do it. Oh man, these last couple weeks, these last couple months are breaking my brain. I'm about to effing lose it. I'm gonna try not to swear on the show here, but I've got plenty of things here to talk about today with week 5. So let's get right down to it with our first run of the day. And I'm going to run with Alabama being a playoff team and Oregon being a serious national title contender. Of course, we're going to talk about the winners of the two primetime games of note here. With Alabama, you had that tough loss there on the road at Florida State. And, it seemed like the end there for Kalen DeBoer. You go into arguably the most hostile environment in the country, and you beat the team that you always beat in Georgia. You beat them between the hedges. There's obviously stuff about this that Georgia needs to figure out. But I will say, for the most part, when it comes to Alabama, there are things that I saw in all three phases that leads me to believe that this team can be a playoff team. Ty Simpson really stepped up for the Crimson Tide today. I thought that he played at a Heisman caliber level, a lot more mobile than I ever gave him credit for. And like I said, he was going to get his through the air. I think in the first half, he was able to find Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, but he really had to grind through it in the second half. Alabama didn't score any points in the second half, and that's why they won 24-21, I believe, is what the final score was. God, Georgia, I hate you. Um, but I also saw Kalen DeBoer do something that I thought was very important. I think Cody would be right there agreeing with me with this. He stopped delegating. He empowered people. Like, I know that's kind of a different sort of tongue-in-cheek thing there, but I think entering this season, Alabama had something like what, 5 coordinators? But I saw in this game, okay, it's Ryan Grubb calling plays on offense, and I'm going to lean on Kane Womack there on defense. Ryan Grubb had a fantastic game. I think some of the play calling there in the first half really kind of got Georgia out of sorts. And I think the fact that like Georgia was never quite there defensively trying to contain this team, particularly when they couldn't really do much running the football there, with Riley or with Jam Miller at all. But it seemed as though in this game, and I'll touch on this more at the end of the show when I talk about Georgia, but this was a game where Kalen DeBoer leaned on his guys and his guys came through for him. He's like, okay, Ty, go out there, play great. Okay, I need Ryan Grubb and I need Ken Womack to come through for me, on the defensive side of the ball and offensive side of the ball. Again, it's kind of late for me here a little bit, but this team is playing with confidence, and I don't think anybody wants to have Alabama on their schedule. Again, this is a team that could have, pulled back considerably. They could have, been redcoating it a bit with them having that blowout win over Wisconsin at Bryant-Denny 2 weeks ago. But they knew what they were getting into with Georgia. They know eventually that Georgia's going to get the best of them, just like Tennessee's eventually going to get the best of Georgia. This is just how the sport works. It's a game of streaks in a lot of ways. But I never really felt that they were afraid of Georgia, but it was kind of like they let Georgia beat themselves. And I think having the composure to allow yourself to do that leads me to believe that Alabama is going to win about 10, maybe 9 games this year and kind of be in the mix to make the playoffs. So hats off to them. Thanks for owning us. I'll turn my cheek over there and yeah, y'all can kiss my ass. That's fine. Congratulations. You got a big one there. And then with Oregon, moving over to Oregon being a serious national title contender. They're 5-0. They're 2-0 in Big Ten play. They beat the snot out of Northwestern previously, and they eked out a tough one there in Happy Valley over Penn State, 30-24, at Beaver Stadium in University Park. And what I like about this is every game, Dante Moore is putting up his numbers. It's the same sort of thing we saw to Dylan Gabriel last year, Bo Nix the 2 years prior. I think Moore is probably closer to being what Nix was than what Gabriel was. So I think that leads me to believe that, Dante Moore could conceivably, win the Heisman Trophy and really achieve all that he can. But what I really liked about Oregon this year is when they're playing somebody who's not of caliber, they smush him. And I've always thought Oregon is just a forever soft program. But I think, Dan Lanning is coming in there with a bit of an edge, trying to prove everybody wrong, like Oregon can win a national title. And maybe they can. This was a team that I was incredibly critical of at the start of the year and all off season. But you've seen how quickly I've changed and pivoted and be like, this is a really good team. And again, I'll talk about Penn State here at the end of the show. I talk with Georgia, but again, going into an environment that's not easy to win. A lot of times when Penn State does a whiteout, they kind of go out and they achieve a lot of success. But they necessarily beat Ohio State. Maybe not Oregon. Penn State might be who we thought they were. But again, this was a game where I wanted to see Oregon be mentally tested, where they were going to deal with some adversity and they knew how to overcome that. And I think in a way, like the Rose Bowl loss last year to Ohio State really lit something inside this program that leads me to believe that, I'm not saying they're going to run the gauntlet, but like this is a team that I think can definitely win a national championship. They're recruiting at a level that they can do this, although they don't have a lot of players in state to potentially make this a reality. They got to go out and get other guys. The coaching staff's kind of coming together. It's a foregone conclusion that this is going to be Will Stein's last year coaching in Oregon. He's going to be a head coach somewhere in the Power Four. I don't know where. Maybe it's going to be in the ACC. Again, I can't really tell you. But like when you see a coordinator thriving as much as he is, that good stuff is on the horizon there for him. And I guess really to kind of tie a bow on it here with Oregon is it was never in doubt for me. There wasn't a point in this game that was going on NBC Peacock at prime time as well, where I've ever felt that Oregon was going to lose. I don't think that they necessarily played with their food as much as what some people may have thought. They're going up against a very worthy adversary at their place in Penn State. But it was kind of the same sort of thing, and maybe even more so. There were points in the game where I thought Alabama was going to lose to Georgia, and Georgia just couldn't take advantage. And again, I think Penn State's got some issues on its coaching staff too. We'll talk about that there at the end of the show. But I would say Oregon right now is very comfortable at 5-0. I don't know if they're going to win all their games. I don't know if they're going to go 16-0. But I think that they're the toast of the town of the Big Ten by a considerable margin. And I think that this team, I think right now this is probably my pick to win a national title right now, 5 weeks in. Again, a lot can change between now and then, but they got their first signature victory. I know they're ranked 6th. They beat the number 3 team in the nation. I mean, I had them as the number 1 team in the country in my playoffs. Are you kidding me? The last couple of weeks, they're going to probably be there again. Again, I'm going to be coming to you guys, on Monday. I'll be Soul Like a Cup as well. Cody's going to be getting back from Nashville at that point. But yeah, hats off to Alabama for keeping their playoff hopes alive with a big win over Georgia, and Oregon for looking the part of a team that can conceivably win it all. So great day here for the Crimson Tide of the Ducks. Let's move on to my second run of the day here. I'm going to run with Ole Miss, Indiana, and Iowa State being serious college football playoff contenders. There's varying levels to this. I was very impressed with Ole Miss beating LSU. And the reason I'm impressed with this is Lane Kiffin's leveled up as a head coach. I think he's got a fantastic staff. I think Charlie Weiss Jr. is well on his way towards being a head coach like his father was. Joe Cox is on the offensive staff. Pete Golding's, a known commodity on defense. But I think, the willingness to go with Trinidad Chambliss over Austin Simmons at quarterback, that's a bold move. I mean, this was supposed to be Austin Simmons taking over there for Jackson Dart, and then Chambliss, the DT transfer from Ferris State, he comes in. He's been a huge help for them. And I think Ole Miss, more importantly, they're playing with a lot of confidence. This is a team that I don't necessarily know if they can win a national title based on how well they recruit, but this is a team that can win the SEC. I think right now, of all the teams I've seen in the SEC, this is the best team. I believe they're 5-0 as well. 5-0. You beat their rival LSU at your place. It kind of went the other way, from a very close Magnolia that went to the Bayou Bengals way previously. I'll talk on LSU here in a second. But I'm looking at Ole Miss as like this is a team that's going to win 10 games annually under Lane Kiffin. I don't know how much longer he's going to be here, but I'll be straight with you. This is a better job than Florida. And I don't think for as much success as he had at in Boca Raton at FAU, don't leave for Florida now. You've got a really good thing going here. God, if you make the playoff at Ole Miss, like they're gonna build a statue for you, man. Like they're gonna put you a statue. I'm not gonna say next to Chucky Mullins, but like you're gonna be a legend there more so than the Mannings. Like you'll be held um in the same breath as Johnny Vaught. And then that's this is the best era of Ole Miss football we've seen since then. And I guess to really tie a bow on this with Ole Miss, I think they'll beat Georgia when they play. um, Home field advantage is gone. We'll see what happens here. I think Georgia can probably win the rest of their games. But I think Ole Miss has there's a confidence here where they're in a tight game that they don't get scared and they find a way to come through. And it doesn't really matter the opponent. And I think that the fact that they don't play the most difficult schedule in the SEC, relatively speaking, uh, the chances of them winning 10 games and making the playoff are very good. And this is a team that entering this year, we're like, oh, they missed their boat. This last year was the year to do it. I think they've got a more mature team. I think they got a more together team. More importantly, I think the coaching staff's leveled up. And if you've got really good coaches in this league, you can go really far. So, shout out to the Landstruck, fence up. I don't even know. Whatever. It's a good time there, in the Grove at Oxford, and hotty toddy, y'all are having a great time. Looking at the other two teams, Indiana, a similar sort of situation. They're also 5-0. And again, this is a team that goes out there under Kurt Cignetti with Fernando Mendoza at quarterback, and they just mush people. This is a team that beats the snot out of them, like Oregon's starting to do now with Dan Lanning, with Dante Moore at quarterback. And you played a really tough game versus Iowa. It got messy. It was in Kinnick. I know how the home crowd can kind of get there and turn games there in Big Ten play. This is a game where I'm not even going to say a lesser Indiana doesn't win. Like Indiana doesn't win this game, but Kurt Cignetti finds a way. I think he's lost 2 games since he's taken over there in Bloomington, and right now, it wouldn't shock me if it's Oregon versus Indiana in the Big Ten championship. And again, I don't know if they meet this year. I think that they do potentially, but it shows that last year's playoff run for them at 11-1, that was not a fluke. You look at the other teams who made the playoff last year, where it kind of caught you by surprise a little bit. You know, maybe not so much Boise State, but Arizona State, SMU for sure. SMU is not even a thought of in this way. And then, Arizona State's got to overcome the Mississippi State loss, which is not actually that bad of a loss because the Bulldogs look pretty good over there. They're 4-1. They just had a tough overtime loss at home to Tennessee. Again, these things happen. Jeff Lebby's coaching that team's ass off. So credit to him there in Starkville for sure. But when I look at Indiana, like being able to win in multiple ways, this just kind of shows that Indiana's here to stay. And I read this really good, fantastic article on Friday for Badger of Honor. I believe it was Riley Nowowski, whatever, former tight end at Wisconsin, transfers to Indiana. And he's talking about the culture there that Coach Sig is building. And he's saying stuff that I'm like, where did all the good Wisconsin players go? They went to Indiana. Like Indiana took their culture. And more importantly, I think Indiana is winning in a more fun way than Wisconsin ever did. Indiana's kind of coming in here with kind of how Oregon was when it was first coming on. Maybe under Chip Kelly, although Mike Bellotti, they won a lot there too, but it looked a little more differently. That era of Ducks football was tough. But Indiana's at 5-0. They're one win away from achieving bowl eligibility. And I think the Big Ten's going to get 4 playoff teams in this year, and I think Indiana is certainly going to be one of them. Hats off to the Hoosiers, winning a very tough game there in Kinnick. As far as Iowa's concerned, you've already got 2 losses on the year, even with Mark Gronowski at quarterback. It's got to be over here for Kirk Ferentz. I got to be straight with you. Like, I don't know how much longer you can continue doing this, because not necessarily that game's a referendum that you lost, because that's how Iowa plays. But you're seeing arguably the worst program in Big Ten football history, turning a complete 180 under its new head coach immediately. Like Indiana is in its glory years. This is at its peak. This is the best Indiana football's ever been. And the fact that they had the stones to pay Tom Allen that massive buyout and get him to leave for a guy that was doing really well, all things considered for Indiana standards, Signetti's elevated that up a level, far so even beyond that. So I'm very, very impressed there with what Coach Zig is doing there. As Cody would say, smoke him through the heater, smoke through the filter. Yeah, smoke those heaters through the filter. And then I said Iowa State. I'm coming back around there on the clones a little bit. They're 5-0. Got a very decisive victory over a halfway decent Arizona team. They beat the Wildcats 39-14. Yes, it's at home. Yes, Rocco Beck kind of turned the ball over a little bit, but you went up against the short king, Noah Fafita, in an Arizona team that had a lot of confidence coming in. And again, Iowa State, growing up, and honestly, when I was in college, like 5 wins was the goal, man. Like they weren't them and Kansas were like the two worst teams like in the Big 10, Big 12 by a country mile. And now we're looking at a guy where it's become an institution there under Matt Campbell. Again, this is a team that is always going to play very tough defense. It's always a question of, are they going to score enough points? And I think with Beck, with the allure of Beck and what you try to do with him, like it gives you an extra gear offensively that you probably haven't had. And again, like the Big 12, we're still trying to figure out who's good. I know I had Texas Tech in there as my pick to win the league last week. It might be Iowa State here again. Utah went out there and they just absolutely annihilated West Virginia after getting clobbered by Texas Tech. TCU, a team that I was coming on hot, well, they got stopped there by Arizona State. So the ASU is legit here as well. I don't know. I don't know if UCF won. I don't really care. We'll see if they're ranked at some point. But probably the best way to explain this with Iowa State is this is a team that I think is just mentally and physically tough in a league that's defined by finesse, in the advent in the era of the air raid, with all those quarterbacks running a shotgun out of Texas. Like Iowa State's just got a real blue collar ethos here. And even though the USC is playing really well, and I'll touch on them here in a second, there's going to be a point there where I think Matt Campbell is going to outgrow what he's doing there in Ames. And again, he's got a choice to make. He can go and bet on himself and see what happens, or he can become an institution at a lower level school that's overachieving. That could be Bill Snyder at Kansas State. That can be Gary Pinkel at Missouri. That can be Gary Patterson at TCU. It could be Kyle Whittingham there at Utah. These coaches all end up having Hall of Fame level careers because they win at places that's not easy to win and they win prolifically. Campbell's become that, but like even more so, I think that like there will be a power two job that opens up that's going to try to, back up the Brinks truck to get this guy to come. I don't know if it's going to work, but like getting Iowa State to the playoff would be a huge deal for that program, given what that history is. Like he's the greatest head coach in that program's history, or at least in the century. And again, Arizona's not the best team, but they're a decent team. They took care of business in the non-conference. They only need 3 more wins to go to a bowl game, and I think that's a big step in the right direction there for Brent Brennan's team. But yeah, shouts out to the Clones, shouts out to the Hoosiers, and shouts out to the Rebels here having, really looking the part of teams that I think are going to be in the playoff conversation moving forward. So let's move on to punt here for a second. I'm going to punt on 3 things in particular. I'm going to punt on LSU ever winning a national championship with Brian Kelly as its head coach. I'm going to punt on Jackson Arnold ever being a serious SEC quarterback. And I'm going to punt on Lincoln Riley ever leading USC to the college football playoff. I wrote about this for Death Valley Voice here in the wake of Magnolia. Like, what's Brian Kelly do? What's the point of him? What's he trying to accomplish here at LSU? This is a guy who's not a likable guy. This is a guy who, at one point in time, when he was at Point Pleasant, Mount Pleasant, wherever the hell it is in Central Michigan, and he made Matt LaFleur and Robert Saleh as grad assistants park cars as opposed to go to their Christmas party. Like that's humiliating. Those guys are NFL coaches. And then Brian Kelly's like, you know what? I'm going to leave Notre Dame because I don't think I can win a national title with the the stringent academic standards, the northern climate, being in northern Indiana, the Catholic overtones, everything that kind of goes along with whatever it is with Notre Dame. But like, I'm also going to throw this in here too. I'm also passing on Sam Pittman. I think he's cooked. Uh, we'll talk about that later. But like, this thing with Brian Kelly is, so you go out there and you get the coordinator you want. You get a Blake Baker. Year one doesn't go so hot, but year two it's starting to figure it out there with since he came over from Mizzou. You've got a seasoned quarterback there in Garrett Nussmeier. He might be hurt, so I'm not going to dog him too bad. But I will say this, like, Nuss has got to be better. He's hurting his draft stock. It stinks, but that's kind of the reality of it all. But I think more importantly, LSU just plays tight, and I don't see them rising to the occasion against high quality ranked opponents. They just don't do it. Like in a way, like the Magnolia Bowl is kind of a referendum there of LSU. And again, LSU only lost by 5 points. I think it was 24-19, if you will. But like LSU's kind of owned this rivalry. LSU, you can win national championships at Ole Miss. We think you can win 10 games there a year if you have the perfect head coach. I don't know if you make the playoff. We'll see. I said that Ole Miss is looking like a playoff contender right now. But with Brian Kelly, I'm just like, this is year four. He's in his 60s. I thought he was a coach the same caliber of what Nick Saban at LSU, Les Miles at LSU, Ed Orgeron at LSU. Like all those guys won a national title. I think Paul Dietzel won it with Billy Cannon back in the 50s. So they've got four in their history. Like for the amount of success that Kelly has had at Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Central Michigan, and I believe Grand Valley State, if I'm not mistaken, like all the success he's had at all of his previous stops, like he should have figured out this Rubik's cube. He should be able to be more impactful with whatever it is. I don't know I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe the offensive line is just not as good as it should be. Like at Notre Dame, that was an institution. At LSU, I don't necessarily see them. I think their quarterback's kind of got to make stuff happen a little bit more than they probably should. Again, the defensive backfield's not really been the same since he's been there. Although Blake Baker's defense is playing a lot better, but you look at the SEC right now. I think I would take probably about five or six teams ahead of LSU to win a national championship before then. You know, like right now, I think what I've seen out of Georgia, they're pretty good. Alabama, they look pretty good. Ole Miss, they look pretty good. A&M looks pretty good. Oklahoma, although I'm going to push back on the fact with Mateer being out, Texas a little bit. I think that Texas has better weapons. Vanderbilt hasn't lost yet, so you get what I'm saying. Like Brian Kelly left Notre Dame thinking that like the program was letting him down, but in reality, I don't know if he's as good of a coach as he thinks he is. And I'm going to go over to another Tiger team in the SEC, and that's Hugh Freeze with Jackson Arnold as the quarterback there at Auburn. He doesn't see the field; he just runs. Um, it's it's just not going to work out with him. And there was a play there in the game where it felt very Peyton Thorne. And I don't know if Jackson Arnold's going to cost Hugh Freeze his job this year. I think Auburn's going to go to a bowl game. They're going to probably win about seven or eight games this year, maybe six. But Oklahoma had no problem moving on with him. This is a guy that this is your third year. Yeah, it's like your third or fourth year of school, man. Like you were redshirt sophomore last year. Like the game's got to slow down a little bit for you. And he doesn't read the defense well. I understand that Mike Elko is a fantastic defensive coordinator there, defensive mind there for Texas A&M. But like Arnold's more talented than Marcel Reed, but Marcel Reed's just kind of the better player. He plays with a greater sense of confidence than Arnold. I think Arnold's like one read, it's not there. I'm going to Justin Fields it and just run. And that might work, if you're playing, lesser competition or in a lesser conference, but you're not beating great teams at Auburn doing that. You're not beating great teams at Oklahoma doing that. And that's why it is what it is. So, it was cute there for a while where Auburn was ranked. Maybe they'll beat Georgia. I don't know. Yeah, I got some also all sorts of thoughts of the dogs here, and I'll finish up the show talking about that with them. But the more I think about it with Jackson Arnold, I'm like, stars don't always matter. Like he was like so well thought of coming out of high school because he could do a lot of things. It's just not translating here. Like unless Georgia's playing them, I really or Auburn's playing like a high caliber team. I got no real interest watching Auburn football because this guy's not a good quarterback. And then finally, I called this. USC was not going to beat Illinois, although it came a lot closer than it needed to be. I think they beat them like 34-32 or something like that. But Lincoln Riley is not making the playoff leading this team. You had Illinois, a team that like got absolutely embarrassed last week versus Indiana. Illinois scored 34 points on the Trojans defense, and I saw the stat on the bottom ledger. I think in their history, and again, like they played in some, but not a lot, the Big Ten, Pac-12 crossover, if you will. I think in the 14 meetings that the Illini have played the Trojans to date, this is the most they've ever scored on them, like 34 points. They could have probably used some versus Indiana, but not that that would have mattered. But needed them all there for to beat USC. Again, this is exactly why I'm never going to be a Lincoln Riley fan until the day I die. This guy's not about conflict. This guy is not really an alpha male. This is a guy who's a finesse king. This is a guy who is bitching, moaning, complaining about like, oh, we got to travel from Los Angeles to Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. You, your school, your commissioner, whatever it is, like you decided to kill the Pac-12 for this. And I get like USC is playing a lot better with Jade Maiev at quarterback. They got a running game. Defense is okay. Maybe not that great, but like they've kind of got the home field advantage. They're figuring it out. But like, look, I don't think Riley has it in him to be a guy who's going to win on the road in a Power Two league. I just don't think that he's got that in him. When he was at Oklahoma, Texas was not back yet. And Oklahoma at that point was dynastic under Bob Stoops. Like they only won one national title under him, but they were regularly winning the league. And Oklahoma's, effectively transitioned sort of in the SEC. Again, it's still early in the season. It remains to be seen how that goes. But for the most part, like USC's put itself in a position that's compromising with travel. And they've got a head coach who doesn't want any of the smoke, even though he's burning brisket left and right. Again, I think they've won enough games at this point where he's going to keep his job. But at some point, newish athletic director for USC, Jennifer Cohen's going to have to ask herself this very serious question. Like, is this okay? Can I get Matt Campbell? Can I get some guy who knows how to win, in this region? Can I get PJ Fleck? I don't know. I think some guy who's got like, blue collar Midwestern ethos, bring them into Los Angeles. Don't worry about the glitz and glamour. Just put in the work. And again, anytime that USC has been good, they have a blue collar ethos about it. People are like, oh, it's glitz and glamour. This is, when like the glamour programs are doing great, whether that's, USC, Miami, or Texas. When Miami was on the come up, they had a lot of blue collar guys, like from like Brevard and Dade County. When Texas is good, they get the farm, they get the guys who really want to be there. USC, they get guys, they play defense and stuff like that. I know modern days, whatever, a Catholic football factory, if you will, but I don't know. I don't know if Riley attracts the right guys for this program. In a way, I think Maeva's covering up a lot of his mistakes. Although I do think that they have a running game. But you look at the Big Ten right now. And again, you chose to go in this league. If the Big Ten is going to get four teams into the playoff, in no particular order, okay, right now I would say if the Big Ten is going to get four teams, if the Big Ten is going to get one team in the playoff, it's Oregon. If it's going to get two, it's Indiana. If it's three, it's going to be Ohio State. Four, it's going to be Penn State. Five might be Michigan. Um, And I think at this point, like thinking that the SEC or the Big Ten are going to get five or more teams in there, it's a little bit far-fetched. I don't necessarily know if that's what's going to happen, but USC losing to the Illini, again, they've got the head-to-head tiebreaker over you. And even though they got smoked by Indiana, that's probably the second best team in the Big Ten I've seen up to this point. So you're kind of wondering, like, is it going to happen? This is, I think, what, year four for him. Same with Brian Kelly at excuse me, it's late. Yeah, a little bit after midnight here. Trying to talk my way through here. I needed Cody to kind of bail me out there, but uh 30 minutes in, talking nonstop, that happens. Yeah, I don't see Riley doing it. He's got to have a come to Jesus moment, but he's just not going to do it. And that's how I feel about pass. And then I'm going to go to punt. And I'm going to punt on, the idea of us burying Georgia and Penn State because they're both still likely playoff teams. And this is a very Cody sort of answer here. Look, I think that there's coaching problems both in Georgia and at Penn State. And it's with two people in particular. For Georgia, it's offensive coordinator Mike Bobo and defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann. For Penn State, it's head coach James Franklin and it's offensive coordinator Andy Koltnecki. Kirby Smart's fantastic at Georgia, although this was not his best game. Jim Knowles is an institution on defense, but you know he can't score all the points for this team. And I think there's things to like about both Gunnar Stockton and Drew Aller, but you also recognize like why neither is like going to win the Heisman. Stockton did okay, Aller did well, but like I feel like Koltnecki and Franklin kind of kept restrictor plates on him until the end. And again, this team lost in overtime. Georgia lost by 3 points at home. You know, these aren't bad losses here. I think this is something that these teams needed to kind of be like, okay, we got to get back to the basics. We're not hot ass anymore. We got to figure out what we're doing. And again, like, I don't know. I kind of knew in the back of my mind this was possible with Georgia. And I knew with Penn State, like, I don't trust James Franklin. Look, Kirby Smart has to get rid of these two coaches. I wrote like the nastiest article on Don the Dog about this. I called Bobo a clown. I basically called Glenn Schumann, Freddie Gonzalez, just a worthless child who can't do a damn thing. And I'm not saying for Georgia that you got to go get Todd Monken, although he might be kind of getting tired of Lamar Jackson there in Baltimore. Dan Lanning's may not grow on trees, but you got to do better than this. You're a top 25 team, and you can't have like bottom of the barrel coordinators in that regard. Like you need a Ryan Grubb. You need you need somebody who's got something who could because it puts a lot of pressure on Kirby Smart where like he's got to have his A game to fix it all. And this was not necessarily that day. There was some stuff where like I think the players were a little too emotional on defense. I think defensively he's trying to like fix all the messes that Schumann creates for him. Like that's the one that's the more of those two, I would move on from Schumann tomorrow if I could. Bobo, you got Drew Bobo at center. It sucks, but like Bobo's probably going to be around a little bit longer than Schumann. Bobo's been trying to get fired since he's had this job two times ago. And as far as it goes with Penn State here, James Franklin's like, look, Penn State's going to make the playoffs just like Georgia is. Penn State's not going to win a national championship because of James Franklin. Georgia could. Georgia just can't beat Alabama. It's just that's how the nature of the beast goes sometimes. But where I'm really concerned is with Koltnecki. This is a guy who had the stones to bet on himself. He's like, you know what? I'm going to leave Lance Leipold behind for a bigger and greener pasture here and see what happens. It's kind of just always been disjointed offensively with him. And again, I think that they picked the wrong quarterback. Like Drew Aller's not as good as Bo Pribula. Bo Pribula, like almost touched on Mizzou. You're like, I get that it was UMass, but you won 42-6. Like Mizzou's 5-0. Pribula's out there doing whatever he can. Aller is just growing broccoli out of his hair. Um, like Drew Aller might end up playing for the Browns and just be another jersey in the long list of guys who don't work out there. But like you're again, you can move on from Koltnecki. You're kind of stuck with Franklin. And it's interesting that Georgia and Penn State are kind of grouped together here. It'll be interesting to see how where they both end up, in my projected playoff field. And then honestly, later in the week when I do, we are doing a simulation, see where they are in FPI. Penn State wasn't a top 12 team. Georgia may not be either. We'll see how FPI views both of them. I think they'll view Georgia a little more favorably than Penn State, just because I think Georgia's got opportunities to get bigger wins here. Plus, Georgia's got the road win over Tennessee. I think that's still impressive. These things happen here, but like again, I don't need to tear into Georgia or Penn State too much right now. I mean, they played close games. They came up a little bit short, but I think, when you're playing teams that are of your ilk, of your caliber, these things sort of happen. Again, this is football. Someone's got to win and someone's got to lose. And this was 3 yards in the Cloud of Punt here on Fall Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams, at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB Fall Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. Really helps the show grow. Again, I just kind of accepted that Georgia's got two awful coordinators. I'm going to get like no sleep either, and I can't wait to see the Atlanta Falcons lose to Dan Quinn and Marcus Mariota because that's just how this weekend's going. Going to be back at Boo Bears because that's apparently where we live. I'll be doing the Monday show, Soul Like a Cup as well. So it'll be fun. I'll talk to myself here for probably about an hour, but I got here and got through all this here in a little bit less than 40 minutes. But once again, thanks for listening. And this is False Start.